Good evening, Pallatrax. It's Simon Pomeroy and Tim Horrible Hodges. Well, let's hope this is working because we're over on the main Pallatrax page this evening, not on the Team Pallatrax page. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll see if this is working. And we always have these technical problems at the beginning of it all. Doesn't seem to be working, Timothy. Oh, no, there's a few little icons popping in. So hopefully this will work. And hopefully we'll get some comments coming through soon as well. We'll have to check on that. Oh, there we go. Things are happening. We're not very technical down here. We'll just try and check on the other machine that the comments are coming through. Yes, cheers, good evening. Rum and Coke, Ribena.
Yeah. My body's a temple.
Richard Ward, hi Pom and team. So obviously we are. Sam Roth, how you doing, mate? Stephen Baines, how you doing? You think you enjoyed the fishing? Thanks again for Sue and Lee and everybody else who went to the fishing. Jamie, how you doing? Young boys, young man, we wish. That was a long time ago.
Where did they go?
Sorry?
Where did they go?
Where did we go? They went to Pheasants Wood. Who's that? Tony, Ant, Heidi. They went to Pheasants Wood. Up somewhere north, isn't it? Up north somewhere. Challenging conditions by all chances. They're really hot up there. You've got a bit pink, mine. He's been out today fishing, catching fish. Hi Chris, how you doing? So yes, we've got a few people bobbing in. So it's my normal Sunday slot live feed, and tonight we have the illustrious, whatever, Sony World Carp champion. Woo! We remind him of that frequently. The time that he cheated that fish
one and
out.
only.
The one and only.
Yeah.
There's a story there. So, hi James, how you doing, mate? Everything good at your end? So I'll just let a few more people come in, and then we will plod on. We're not really got anything prepared because I've been out for the biggest Sunday lunch in the world. My son, who's back going. Hi Jason, who's going. Ben, who's going back to university today. He said I want to go out for a really nice meal. So Pete, how you doing? Neil, how you doing?
Did he pay?
And no. I had to buy our own meals. Can you believe that? And had to pay for all their drinks as well. How you doing, Paul? Everybody good? Everything good with you, I hope, and yours? So yes, I'm stuffed, and well, you're always stuffed, aren't you?
I'm on a new regime.
No, it's no point, mate.
Regime.
Past the point of no return.
I know.
It's just absolutely a waste of time. So yes, so here we are. So it's always easy if you ask us any questions. We do have a raffle running now. If you haven't done the raffle before, I'll remind you over the next 3/4 of an hour. But the raffle prize tonight, and all you have to do is say yes. Or send yes on Messenger to the Pallatrax, main Pallatrax Facebook site. Not like the team page when you Facebook me, but on the main Pallatrax Facebook page. So if you'd like to win this little bundle of goodies, so we've got some of our serious boosters. Great for blinging up those hook baits in sight. Matthew Rice, I know where you are, Matthew, down on the lakes. And some of our phenomenal grits hooks. So if you'd like to win this little bundle, just ping yes to the main Facebook page. And yeah, hi Paul Spinks, welcome aboard. So what should we talk about then, Tim? Tim's been fishing today up on Charlie's pool, which is the pool at the top of Ashmansworthy Pools here. So what's been happening? Because I've not really seen you.
Well, it started using small baits and got plagued with small carp.
That's our stock in there, a little stock.
Yeah.
Hi Aaron, hi Robert.
So decided that as soon as you told me there was 40 proper ones in there?
There's 43 mirrors ranging between about 11, or they went in at about 11 through to just over 20 and one common.
And I've caught that common today.
There's only one in there.
Well, allegedly.
And that, no, there is only one. I put them in there unless somebody else has been, unless you've been growing. Hi Gary, how you doing? Oh, that's so interesting. What was it like?
It was immaculate and very fat. So that fish...
Bit like me then?
No, fat, yes.
Oh, right,
but not
okay.
immaculate.
Oh, it's so cruel.
Right. So I started off so small hook baits and got plagued with just constant rod tip knocks and bits and pieces. So I then opted to go to bigger hook baits I had a mirror about 14-ish.
They're pretty, aren't they?
Pretty
They're
one,
all really
fully
scaly
scaled,
ones. We've
great
chosen.
big fins, big rudder, big pecs, fought really, really hard. And that took, those squabs, how big were they, 14s?
14, yeah.
I put 3 of those on a head.
Did you?
3 of those on a head.
Greedy pig rig.
Greedy pig rig. Very short hook link, very short, maybe 4 inches tops. And obviously a ball of method.
4 inches. Yeah, right, mate.
What's that?
Yeah, no, fine. I'm not saying nothing.
6,
I'm
is
not
it?
saying nothing. I'm not saying nothing.
4 inches.
Anyhow, Gary King missed you out at Lequy last week. I think you had a bit of a blessing there, not him.
Yeah.
Snuffling around your swim, looking for pastries. Jason, good evening. Jason's out on the bank at the moment, I know for a fact. And have you finished yet, Jason? But he has been smashing it out of the park somewhere. I think last count was something like 15 fish you've been hauling on the old stone system. So well done, Jason. So big baits.
Big baits, and then the other fish, the only common in the lake, came on an single 18 mil. Again, short hook link.
Yeah.
Over-
We are fans of
over-
the old short hook link, aren't we?
Over a bit of a bed of pellet and a few chopped boilies. Not a lot, because I'm fishing in the margin, and I always view in the margin, I don't need to attract the fish because the fish are constantly swimming up and down the margin. So I always feel all you've got to do is give them something to find.
A little mouthful. Well, here's this one. What's this one here? Sorry. Gary King, I measure 2 catfish to £32 plus 8 carp to £30 using Pallatrax size 8 wide gape. Stones, Pallatrax, Daphne.
Do
Crush.
like a wide gape, one of my favourite patterns.
We're the wide gape boys. More. That's a great result there, Gary. Well done, mate. Hi, Sean, Steve, Terry. So yeah.
So right, while we're on the subject of wide gapes, we go back to the theory that I like wide gapes because of the curved point.
The intern beak.
Yeah, beaked point. Because everything in nature that has to catch things to eat has curved claws or talons. Everything.
Yeah, we've agreed. We don't disagree on much, me and Tim, to be quite honest. We like the same cakes, don't we? Historically we've enjoyed the same things, but now you're old and knackered, not allowed to do so many fun things. But hi Les, Jason, you're out and just a £19 to go. You've got them smashing it out there, mate. How many fish you on now, Jason? That's a brilliant session. Yeah, like Tim says, if you think about it, and I just want to I like the wideness of the actual gape of the hook. The wider I'm happier. But also the fact is you've got that intern beak, and like Tim says, nothing in nature with a claw has a straight claw. It's always got an intern. Hi Neil, hope you're well, mate.
And anyone who's got a cat can vouch for the fact that when that claw gets caught in something, they're buggers to get out.
Well, it is. It's nature's creation. Yeah. It's nature's kind of way. It's improved, and that's why that you know this is why you see the osprey every now and again. It comes down, gets a big salmon or even a carp. It's too heavy. It can't get rid of it because of the intern. Because of the law of physics, it keeps on turning and turning, and then the bird drops down and drowns. And that's been known plenty of times. So yeah, we are a fan of that. And also, I like the fact, especially with barbel fishing on the rivers, you've got a bit of an intern just to protect that beak. But each to their own. I mean, we sell loads and loads of the curve shanks. Loads of those.
Bob is a big fan of the curve shank.
Yeah. Bob's is Tim's son who runs Lequy.
So his go-to is usually the curve shank, whereas mine's the wide gape. So it's horses for courses to a certain degree, and I always believe that you should go with what you like using and feel confident in.
Well, it's catching your fish.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Consistent catching. I think, there's so many other things that surround it, isn't there? But
there's nothing worse than sitting there, trying something new and having no confidence in it. You always think, I can remember being shown the original hair rig, which was so alien to everything we'd done before, where we were burying the hook inside a bait and all of a sudden you were dangling it 3-4 inches below the hook. And I was sitting there the first evening I was using it thinking, this isn't going to work. How can this work? and then all of a sudden had
Rusty, Wayne, hello, sorry, Guarantee. I'm
just had a mental take on it, and of course never looked back. The hair rig was probably the biggest invention, or the biggest step forward in carp fishing. Let's not call it an invention. I mean, it's a tactic or an invention, but it certainly revolutionised carp fishing back in the 70s.
Oh, and look where it took us.
Yeah,
and look where we are now, for the good, the bad, and the ugly of the scene. You know, we really did start off with a hair rig. It was an invention. You know, it was never patented. It was just a couple of anglers, wasn't it, who started kind of really fiddling around with it. And then
Kevin Maddox and Lenny Middleton.
Yeah. Jason, he's on 12 fish, all on the Steam Link and size 6 grips. Yeah, I must admit I am a fan of that Steam Link, which is the translucent coated Dyneema we do. And again, none of this is down to try and flog stuff. I mean, I've been very fortunate that actually we can talk about it in a minute. A statement you said to me earlier. But you know, I'm using the stuff I want to use, and I've gone out and sourced it. And Steam Link is something very, very. I'm with you there, Jason. It just continues to catch fish.
Whereas I'm a big fan of fluorocarbon.
Yeah.
Both my fish today came on stiff fluorocarbon.
You'd have caught lots more if you'd have seen them.
Probably.
Yeah, but there you go. But you always fight. You always just have to try and, you know, it's because you can't tie a Dyneema rig up to 2 fat fingers. There you go. Stephen Thomas is asking, what size hook for a £30 carp? And Tim has caught more £30 plus carp you share a stick at.
Now, it's not what size hook for the size of fish. It's more what size hook for the size of bait. Because if you use a big bait and you've got a small hook, there's less chance of the hook catching because the bait has too much effect on the hook. So you really need to match the hook size to your bait. So if you're going to use an 18mm boilie, you're not out of sorts or wrong in using a 6 or a size 4. Now, in fact, Bob has caught his biggest French carp, which was 57 pounds, on a size 14. So you don't need a big hook to catch a big carp.
You need a strong hook.
A sharp strong hook.
But
and those 14s, you try and bend one.
And the thing is, when a small hook goes in, it kind of does really bury itself in. But saying that, it's not. I wouldn't be suggesting. I mean, personally, you know, when I'm fishing my own lakes or horseshoe, it's a 6 or an 8 wide gate for me. I don't. I know some people fish much bigger hooks. There's a belief out there. It's impossible. Some of this stuff we have to base on assumptions. But you know, a bigger hook gets a better hook hold, and etc. But I've hardly ever bumped a fish on a 6 or an 8. To be fair,
my view on hooks: a hook is an inedible object. So when a carp sucks your bait in, it's got something in its mouth it doesn't want to eat, and the bigger it is, the more obvious it is. They don't know it's a hook. They're not that clever. No one's ever told a carp or any fish that this is a hook. All they know is they've got something in their mouth they don't want to eat. And in their natural feeding environment, they spit out all the unedible or inedible things. So I often think if I'm using a big hook, there's more chance that they'll try and spit that out. And because the hook and the bait are as attached, there's a chance it will spit everything out. Now, if we watch any underwater footage, and it's well worth watching that underfishing
or Galen, who's doing all his
you will see fish sucking in rigs and blowing them out all the time. And we can make a million assumptions why they're doing that. Sometimes I think it's because they don't like the food. Sometimes I think it's because they know they've got something inedible in their mouth and they just spit it out because they know they can try and pick the food up again. So, but we're guessing because we can't ask them. But a bigger hook has got that problem of it's more metal, more stuff in their mouth. All this jingly jangly, which we've talked about for donkey's years.
Sorry, just Gary King. Gary said he's just come back from the Lequie by the looks of it. 100% confidence using the wide gate grips. I know he's on the grips in 3 visits to the Lequie, and I've had 24 runs and landed 24 fish, which I think is testimony to your angling skills, firstly, but obviously it's good that the hook's held firm. So hang on, there was another one there. So Gary's saying, so were you on the size 8s out at Lequie, Gary? Good evening, Sue. Thanks for doing all you did this weekend. So yeah, so Gary's saying he, by looks at it, he obviously must be on that. So what's James saying? That's the need for good quality hook. Unfortunately, I've had size 6 hooks bend and snap in the post from a reputable band. Only seeing one. That's the trouble is. I see one grip. Oh dear me, what's happening here? I'm pressing the wrong buttons. You see? Oh no,
my God,
no! It's the and because it's pointing to a hard snap. Yeah, I mean, the thing is with hooks, and Tim and I have both been in the trade for donkey's years now. I've been 25 years. You've probably been closer to 35, and it's all about the ingredients, as I say. So if you get a good quality wire, so you're using high grade wire, then you get a better performance. These ones that are snapping and bending out.
What you've got to remember is most hooks, if they're pulled into the bend, you'll find it very difficult to snap them or bend them. But if the hook point, which I've quite often, especially if you're pulled into a tree, a branch or something, the hook point's never actually gone that far in. So you're actually, when you're pulling hard, you're pulling the hook open. Yeah,
you're pulling it on the... It's natural, if you think about it, what Tim's saying is if you pull it on the point, it's like a lever, isn't it? So if you're coming down here, you shouldn't, even with a poor quality fish. But if you're just it's kind of just hit into the lip, a hard lip or something, you're pulling there, you are going to potentially open out of it. So it is, it's a bit of mix and match. If it's a poor quality hook or one that's got a flaw in it, because they do sometimes, unfortunately. But predominantly hooks tend to open out when there's been a relatively poor hook hold or it's onto a hardened mouth. And but again, we have to make certain assumptions. But we both agree, don't we? A hook. There's chains to the link of successful approach to fishing, and a sharp, strong, proven hook pattern is a must.
Well, I saw something on, believe it or not, TikTok today.
Oh, you little TikToker. TikTok.
And it was a guy talking, and I think he's a Gardner sponsored angler. And he said something, and I don't often, you don't always agree with everything that's said, and whether it's right or wrong, it's up to individuals. But he said that a barbless hook that pulls in up to the bend of the hook doesn't move around. Once it's in, and when people say to me, barbless hooks fall out, and I always go, well, how? And they go, well, when the line goes slack. And I always go, well, when do you let the line go slack? The only time you ever let the line go slack is when the fish might get snagged, and that's the whole point about a barbless hook, in theory, that it should let the fish get off.
Fish safety first, isn't it?
Yeah, but people make this assumption, because for a hook to come out, it has to go in the opposite direction that it went in. And when you're playing a fish, there is no time during the fight that the hook is going to go backwards. I
think nowadays, especially with some of this overgunned, 3 3/4 pound test curve rods and all this heavy stuff, I don't think... it's a bit of a balancing act, because you don't want people to pull too hard into the fish. But when I personally play a fish, I play my rod tip. I'm not really looking at the fish. I'm keeping an eye on it, but I'm not playing it. I'm making sure I've got that bend in that rod tip. Now, unless I've got a poor hook hold, as in like it's just on the outside of the mouth or something like that, I'm really mega confident with the way I'm fishing. So if you keep that bend and you play the rod tip, and you've always got a bend. Now, I see loads of people over the years having their own fish shoots and things, where people tend to walk towards, they take a step forward as they're reeling in, and they drop the rod tip down, and there's always a tiny element of slack, and that's all they need to get off, isn't it? They don't need more.
I mean, playing fish, it's an art in itself. I remember talking to one of the old school anglers, maybe someone who knows him, who's heard of him, is a guy called Mike O'Yea, bit of a character. He used to have a lake in the Colne Valley, small lake, big fish. And he described playing carp. He said, you need good hands. And I said to him, what do you mean? He said, to know when you're playing a fish, when you can sometimes just move your hands forward a little bit as the fish lunges, and other times when you need to let it have a lot more line. And it's having that feel for what the fish is doing.
But the thing is, and this is where I think that, you know, the potential is problems, because you're totally right. Because it's like an art. I suppose it's a bit like golf, you know, and things like that,
Feel,
like a racket.
yeah.
It's a feel, like cricket shot or something like that. And what you need to do, and I would always suggest people, is to, I'm going to let you answer this question, the next one, because I know it's one of your passions. But you need to catch, you need to practice, and I see a lot of anglers nowadays, they're seeking those bigger fish straight away. And I can understand the draw of a bigger fish, but it's like, let's just say squash. You start playing squash, you don't get to the top straight away. You start, you practice, and that's all I would ever say, is balancing rods and going out there and catching lots of fish. So you get the feel, you get used to the lunge, and it does it. You know, it's certainly very different on different break and strain rods, different manufacturer rods, things like that. But Pete's got a good question for you, Tim, because I know we're both again on the same wavelength of this. What test curve would you recommend? Now, Pete, I take it we'll just take, unless you come back and say different, we're talking carp here. Not that we are just solely carp Pallatrax, we are all species, but 95% are carp. So
Right.
over
Test
10.
curves in rods are greatly misunderstood because people assume you need a high test curve to catch a bigger fish, which is not true. What you need is a rod that can cast the relevant size weight you're using, and if it's a method ball, might weigh 2 or 3 ounces, maybe more at times, depending on how big your ball is. But if you've got to lob a method ball a long way, you're going to need a stronger rod than if you're just lobbing one 30 or 40 yards. But stiff rods inherently bring their own issues. Now, a stiff rod, high test curve, say let's talk 3 pound plus, they are designed for casting a long way. And if you're never fishing over 100 yards, there is absolutely no reason to fish with a rod with higher test curve than 3 pounds. If you can't cast 120 yards with a 2 3/4 pound carp rod, it's not the rod, it's you, right? And it's only because you're not getting it right. And it's a bit like, I can go out and play golf as many times as I like. I'm never going to be Tiger Woods because quite often I don't get it right.
And he's a lot better than you.
Yes, and
And
it's
he's
about
American.
yeah, and it's about practice again.
He's got a full head of hair. Right, what we're going to do quickly, because this is interesting. So I've written on a bit of paper here, if I was to bring out a carp rod tomorrow, Pallatrax, we're missing a few questions, so I'll come back to those in a second, folks. Tim, you write, and don't let me nick, the test curve of a carp rod. If Pallatrax was to bring out carp rods tomorrow, and I'm not looking, I'm not seeing...
One rod or
just one rod we were going to start off with, because we thought that was the best. What would it be? And
all
I'm sure-
round?
No, not all round.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you only had to buy one rod, you haven't got the budget to buy more than one rod.
Oh, okay.
Then you've got to buy a rod that.
Right, well, I'm going to change mine then, if that's the case. Yeah, I know where. Okay, yeah, cool. Right, you go for it.
Right.
You go for it.
I know what I use.
Yeah, no, go on. Then I'm going to change. But you write yours, Terry. Oh, I've got a pen here.
I've written mine.
I'm going to change mine then because we're talking an all-round, all-budget.
Yeah.
You know, so it'll do everything. So I'm going to
And
go.
I'm going to talk about the length as well.
Oh yeah, okay. I'll give you that as length. I'll give you length, and so mine is 2.5, 12 foot.
And mine is 2.75.
There we go.
Right,
So-
12 foot. 12 foot. Now, I know there's a fashion.
Hang on a second. Let me just go because everybody's putting their answers, which is great. See you later, Tim Bins. Tinny's off down the road. Well, sorry, I've missed a few questions, so I hate it. So there's Sue. Looking forward to seeing you down here, Sue. So, hi Liam, no worries at all, mate. Gary, I'm using 3 1/4 pound Tesco rods, but once I've abandoned a rod, I allow it to do its job. Simon Weston, good evening, Simon. Simon's just returned from France. What about setting the clutch? We'll come back to that. Good question. So then Rusty was saying, I was at Dream Links. I fish on Gamma with size 6. Not a fish, but I towed in 10-foot lumber tree. The hook that buries into the wood, I have total confidence to hook and Gamma. I think that is, yeah, well, we can talk about Gamma as well. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Thanks for that, Rusty. So, right, so has the use of bait boats killed the art of casting?
Yes.
Oh, hang on a second. We'll come back to that. Yeah, yeah, we are both in there, to be fair. Colin Womble. He's in hospital at the moment, Colin. I'm glad you've popped in, Colin. Hope you're well, mate. Best wishes from all of us, everybody in the whole widey world. Get better soon, mate. We need you back out there, hauling away. So we'll carry on. So Rusty's saying 2.75. Gary King 2.75. Neil is 2.5. Chris is 2.75, and Gary is 12 foot. Rusty is 13 foot. Pete is 3.5. Robert, 12, £3, 2.75. Colin, £3. James, 2.75. Alan is just giving us a thumbs up. Thirty will give you the casting distance. Yeah, like I say, Rusty, it's all each to their own. And at the end of the day, I think where me and Tim come from in our experiences, we're down the, you know, if I was to fish on rods, I'd be quite happily to carp fish on 2.25s. I think, you know, the fight, the thing, you know, exactly.
That's what I use for nearly all of my carp fishing, where I don't have to cast more than 100 yards, because there's plenty of power in them. Right, I've caught big carp on fly rods, which bend all right through. Yeah, so it's not the test curve as such that's about catching big carp, right? But you get a far better feel with a softer rod. Now, with a stiff rod, I see a lot of people bounce fish, you know, because the rod hasn't got that give in it. It doesn't matter what anyone says about, oh, the tip's quite soft. When you got that fish under the net, they're doing all sorts of things, you know, they're right under the rod tip. And a stiff rod doesn't have the same give in it that a softer rod does.
And that's what a match angler has, the elastic.
Yes.
So there's always that bit of give.
But I'll give you an example of how I look at rods. In the very early 80s, I was persuaded by Frank Warwick to join Harefield in the Colne Valley. And the first trip I had down there, I quickly realised that my 2 3/4 rods were totally inadequate for some of the long-range fishing I had to do. It was a 70-acre gravel pit, and at times the fish were well out there, 150, 160 yards plus. So I realised that I needed to upgrade my rods. So I did. I upgraded them to a stiffer test curve, a faster taper, which was a rod designed for casting. Now those rods, nowadays I very rarely fish at that sort of distance, 150 yards plus, so I'm quite happy to use my 2 1/4. But again, we use that analogy of golf. There's a reason you have 13 clubs in your bag. Some are designed for hitting the ball a short distance, and some are designed for hitting the ball a long distance. So it's the right tool for the right job. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people can't afford to have lots of different tools. That's why I said a 2 3/4 is a good all-round tool. It will cast 100 yards plus, and unless you need and do fish these big waters, which is actually only a small percentage of carp anglers.
But isn't that the case? We've moved on. We both, well, I've had a couple of tackle shops. You've worked in tackle shops. Isn't it a case, and because we're probably reasonably grumpy old men and very cynical, I suppose, about some of the things in the trade, isn't it a case that they can kind of, over the years, they just like added another £1/4 of a pound to a test curve, so we're now getting to £4 test curve carp rods?
I honestly believe that is more about persuading people to spend money, because I'm using rods now that I was using 15 years ago. There's nothing wrong with them.
Well, when I can always remember a big brand when I had my first tackle shop, and like you buy in the new rods and have them all set out and things like that, and some would sell and some wouldn't, and then 6 months later they'd bring out exactly the same test curve rod with a different colour ring or something like that, and I'd be going, yeah, but I haven't sold these ones yet. They go, oh, don't worry, you know, they put them in the bargain bin, you know, these are the new. I said, well, what's the difference? And there wasn't any difference. It was just, you know, the new fad. So I think the thing is, if you look, I base a lot of my fishing on my fly fishing experiences and my match fishing experiences. And if you look at the match angler, they're armed differently for different venues. So they've got things, you know, it could be a pole, it could be a waggler, it could be a feeder, heavy feeder, etc., etc. Whereas you know, I don't think it's practical or affordable, in truth, to have lots of different variations. So, like Tim says, you know, you err to the side. Now, somebody said, will I bring my own rods out? I mean, I have had historically, to be fair, on the Harrison Blanks, and they're 2 3/4, and that's all, you know, I tend to fish on if I'm like horseshoe and things like that. Here, you know, smaller lakes, no snags, I'm much happier fishing on a 2 1/4. You know, you get so much more, and there is definitely a lot of people, and Simon and a couple of other people said, hi Lee, you know, you bumping fish on these heavy test curve rods, and that's purely because they can't bend, there's no give, so basically they hit that kind of, I suppose, momentum. You lock into that fit, and then there's no give, so the only give point becomes either a weak point in the line or the hook point, and that's when you can get some quite bad mouth damage. So having that spring effect when the fish lunges, and that's why I'm very keen to try, when I have my tutorials here and things like that, I'm showing people how to play the fish out, and, you know, really let them have their head, enjoy the fight. You know, you don't try and get them in too quickly, for loads of reasons. And one thing is when they under the rod tip and they roll, and there's big, you know, the 30-pound carp, there's some serious momentum there going with that fish, and that's when you tend to bump a lot of fish. So it's almost like you're having to match. But going back to that once, we've missed a few here about setting clutches. Tim, right. You have that one. But don't, sorry, Tim speaks more than me, but so don't, just a brief.
Brief, right.
Lee.
Most people set their clutch by just literally grabbing the line in front of the reel and pulling. And technically, that's nonsense, because you need to set a clutch. You need someone, or you need to be in front. Imagine that where the fish is pulling, right? So if you bend the rod and you pull the line, you want the clutch to go to release line before technically it would snap, right? So if you've got 15-pound line, you want it to release before it gets to that breaking point, right? But if you do it just by pulling it off the reel, you don't know how that's going to react when the rod's bending. So if you can get your mate to hold the rod, the lead, and pull and think,
lead, right, stone, right, he's doing it on purpose,
and pull and think, well, that's how hard, so I just need to let the clutch off a little bit, because you can always have a clutch set slightly looser, because you've got things called thumbs which you can put on the spool, you know, to give it a little bit extra pressure.
And it's also, you know, it's a good way of talking about the feel, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, using your fingers and their thumb on your spool, it's really good. What's Colin saying? He adjust the drag while playing a fish. You know, a lot of people backwind. So there's lots of different things going on there. But the main thing is that you balance everything. I had a gentleman come down here the other day, relatively new for fishing. And again, I kind of set him up with everything, the stone system, and talked how we're fishing. And what, if anything, he'd done two things from the off wrong. One, his clutch was set to maximum tight, so there's absolutely no give. So unless he was backwinding, he was up against it if he had a fish. And the other thing is, and this is one for everybody, is he'd set his bait runner clutch so loose. So it's absolutely, you know, he was just peeling off once you pulled it, just peeled off. Now, how I personally, and again, we'll all have different opinions on this, but personally, and I know Bob does this, and you probably do it as well, we're not looking for the fish to run. We don't want it to run to be fair. We want it to basically hook itself and there be enough pressure for that hook to go in. But we don't want that fish hurtling off around the lake, dragging a line left, right and centre. You totally out of control. So we're literally fishing, going back to my, if that was your bobbin, and that is a bite on a float. That's how, such a small movement of line. So if that's happening, that's what I want. And then I'm on my rod. I'm not wanting that fish to
potentially find a snag.
Yeah, exactly. And okay, I know, because I've talked to people like, it's a big buzz, the sound of the alarm shooting off. But you just got to remember, going back to the bait boat one, each to their own. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a bait boat person. I know Tim isn't, but that's not saying there's anything wrong with it. People want to do that kind of fishing. But what you need to do, you need to think in all areas of it. If you balance everything, and bite indication isn't about a screaming run. You need to control it. And like I say, if you've got a fish, as long as your clutch is set on your bait runner or your drag or however you're fishing, just enough so the rod won't leap off your spank sticks or pods or whatever, and that is it, and I get that's what I'm getting. That's the runs I'm getting. I'm not getting hurtling runs. It's that, because they're up against it, they're pulling it, but they can't pull it so far that it's going to pull my rod in, if that makes sense. So just think about that. Don't have that bait runner clutch set too loose, because it will, the fish will just hurtle off, and by the time you've got onto it, like Tim said, in a snag, across other lines or whatever.
Well, certainly.
Hi Dan, back from her. So what have we got here? Pete saying, Pom and Tim, I'm using stones by local lake with 0.40 fish, 15-pound line at 35 to 40 ramps. That's why I use a 3.5-pound Tesco rod. Like I say, we're never here to critique. All we're here to is kind of, me and Tim have been knocking around. Tim's ex-editor of Advanced Carp and ran, Planchet out in France and one thing another.
So what, 40 wraps is technically what? 4 fours, 160, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, now, if you're fishing at range, you can't cast 160 yards with a 2.25-pound Tesco rod, because it's too bendy. So that's when you need, and I've got the tools. If I need to fish at long range, I'll get my big rods out and my big reels, and I can welt them out there, right? But in the last 15 years, I've rarely had the need to go and fish somewhere like that. But if I do, if I say went to Chantico or the Orient or one of the, Cassian or whatever, big French waters, where you weren't allowed to boat, because some of them they don't let you, like Medine, you're not allowed to use boats, you need to cast. And if you're going to sling a 4-ounce lead, you need a rod that can do it. All right? But I would say that at least 80% of English carp anglers are fishing lakes that if they cast 100 yards, they'd be fishing on the opposite bank.
Well, this is the thing, and this is going back to trying to balance your kit and find, like you say, 2.75, if that's going to do the majority of situations. What you need to be very careful of, and where I kind of, an observation I make, is people progress, and so suddenly they've got huge big pit reels, huge like 3.75 pound test curve rods, because every now and again they might fish at distance, and you only fish at distance if the fish are there. I've seen lots of people like fishing at Horseshoe, for example. They're fishing as far as they possibly can, but they're actually casting over the fish. They're casting so far over the fish, and so it kind of defeats the object.
Sometimes it does become macho about how far you can cast. Right? And I've actually had a rep from Grays come to me once at Linford Lakes, and he said to me, I've got these new 12-foot, 3.5-pound rods that we've had built. He said we'd had them designed for casting. He said, you've got a reputation for being able to cast. And it's a sort of, almost becomes a macho thing. I can cast 150 yards, 160 yards, whatever. But technically, when people talk to me about long-range fishing, I always say to them, long-range fishing is 10 yards further than you can cast, whether that's 50 yards or whether it's 160 yards.
But again, like I was saying to you, in the UK especially, there's hardly any waters where you really need to hoof it out. And many a time, if you are, you're casting over the top of the fish.
Yeah, and it's
But
Yes,
when one day,
it's a small
again, it's an observation. You know, I see certain people who are out there who are like, you know, have made almost a living out of casting, distance casting, showing people how to distance cast and things like that. But you never see them catch any fish.
Well, I'll give you an example of how. I mean, we go back to bait boats and casting. Right, combine the both. I was a member of a syndicate called Dovecot, which is just outside Milton Keynes, Newport Pagnell. And the original owner didn't allow bait boats. And there was an island in the middle of the lake which only the best casters could reach. You couldn't get bait out there, it was too far. But you could cast that far if you were good. And of course the good casters caught fish out there because the fish used to live out there because they were safe. Then he sold the lake because he wanted to retire, and the new owner allowed bait boats. And of course, as soon as everyone turned up with bait boats, everyone could fish the island. Now you can barely get a bite round that island because the fish have become terrified. They haven't got anywhere safe.
And when it comes to baits, I mean, if you look at Europe, you know, Europe is it's got some vast waters. I've fished like Medine, 10,000 acres, and you know, things like that. And obviously they are an edge. They are an edge to get you under tree canopies and things like that. And it's each their own. For me, as an old school angler, it doesn't sit well with me. And that's just a personal thing. I'm not here to criticise at all. It's just not for me.
Do you know what is strange? Now, at Planchette, the lake I was running over for Dunway, it's only a little lake, and I used to have probably 60% of my customers were Dutch. And they all use boats. They all use boats.
Oh, you do. Huge in Europe.
They all use 2 3/4 pound rods because they don't need to cast because they've got a bait boat.
Well, it's funny. I did a film out in Poland years ago, and we were with this Polish group. We set it up so we had to go to we were fishing the stone system and things like that. A lake that we'd never fished before. I don't even know where it is to this day. And we got there, and there was like 6 or 7 of these guys, and it was me and Rich Shaw, and none of them said. They basically openly said, "We can't cast. We only use boats." And there was one guy there who was kind of the running of that team over there, and he was a big lad, and within a couple of hours. You know, I'm no great. You know, Tim's taught me how to cast better. But within a couple of hours, he was casting massive distances. But in Europe, it is very, very much bait orientated.
They're either using bait boats
or bone baits.
Boats, yeah.
Or proper boats. Yeah. I mean, I fished Vinkerveen, where you're fishing off islands, and they literally got boats with proper engines on. As soon as they get run, they call it drilling, don't they? They go out there and they drill the fish because they go straight out in the boat. You know, somebody's driving the boat, somebody's hiking in on the reel, and then they drill the fish. So they don't actually play it. They play it from down where they've hooked it up. Not my cup of tea again, personally, but, you know, each to their own. Where else are we having here? James, send yes to the main Pallatrax page for a chance to win 2 packs of grips and through. Okay. I'm only fishing 4 lengths out, 2 3/4 Tesco rods. Yeah, I mean, the last 2 fish I had down here were out the margins. I would say 90% of my fish throughout my fishing journey, in almost whatever species I've been after, have been literally in the margins. You know, I don't fish out. I've got to fish out if I fish far. And I'm a short range master, long distance disaster personally, but I fish within my capabilities. So I'm not going to fish at huge distances I can't get to. But that's infrequently never happened, and it only really happens if I can't move. Because normally if a fish is showing around the other side of the lake, I'll just move, you know, and it's something that a lot of people don't do.
Well, not only that, it's carp fishing's become so busy. Now, if you go back to the 70s and 80s, you'd turn up at lakes and you'd be the only one carp fishing. You know, so you could move around. Now, you turn up at a lake, and if you don't pick a swim quickly, there won't be a swim to fish. So people don't have that luxury. When you read articles by the so-called experts and the superstars who say, walk round for 3 hours until you find the fish... Yeah. Well, how many people have actually got that luxury of turning up and being able to wander around with a bucket to put in a swim.
If you can, it's obviously a brilliant
Great,
way.
yeah.
Go to the fish. But if you, like I say, a lot of these waters nowadays, unless you're on a syndicate or something like that.
Well, you look at St John's and Linear in Oxford, there's people queuing up behind you to get in swims. So it's not like you can wander around.
No, you have to. You've got what's in front of you, and you've got to do the best. So let me just go on to this one. I've got it's a question from Ed Shackcloth and Michael Sullivan. It's basically recent experiencing. This is Michael saying, and I think these actually work in tandem. Recently experienced a problem with, we think it's eels, whittling down hook baits and removing them from the air, getting no indication why this is happening. These are just on boardies straight from the back. And Ed is saying, how would you fish signal which is crayfish infested lakes, please? Well, I think, Michael, your problem, I'm not saying 100%, but in my experience, it won't be eels, it will be crayfish. It's very, very unlikely.
You're more likely to get a run off an eel.
Yeah, I've caught plenty of eels. Pallatrax, we used to catch some decent eels on.
Quite often they'll pick a boilie up and move off, so you get a run, but you pull the boilie out of its mouth because they may not have swallowed it like a carp does, so you don't get the hook hold. I had that problem at Waveney Valley. Crayfish, though, are the past masters at being able to somehow remove a boilie stop.
Oh, they're not thick.
I don't know how they do it, but they seem to be able to. Because crayfish, they don't whittle a bait away quickly.
That's what now, wasn't they?
Yeah, they haven't got like big mouths where they're chewing lumps of bait.
They're nipping a bit off,
nibbling away. Right, but they are very good at removing the boilie stop, and it defies me how they do it, and then they just literally pull it off the hair, which is very, very frustrating. And the only way to solve that is by using harder hook baits. Now you can get into all this meshing.
Sorry, can I just before Tim moves on to that, because there is a couple of ways you can get around it. One I like, one I totally dislike. But also, if you're fishing places like, especially France, like Le Quay being a prime example, fabulous Lake Le Quay. We've got a team fishing over there in end of March. Hopefully you'll be there as well. And got some big fish over there. Really looking forward to it. But we do know this time of year, the poisson chat, which are these tiny, they're amazing looking if you get them, these tiny little crayfish. Catfish. And they will nibble and nibble and nibble and eat that boilie to nothing. So the way I would, and I'll let Tim go on, the way I deal with it is what we do. And this was actually by default. I don't know, some of you folks might have seen this already, but this is the Pallatrax. They're basically, you probably won't see it, but hardened hook baits. So what these are hook baits, freezer baits, which are put in this, and it's got a sugar content. So you have to drill a hole in these first, because by the time they've been in there a couple of weeks soaking, they go off like bullets. They're really, really hard. And that was just an accident. I was trying to get a bait to really take on a really thick loop that stayed with it, etc., other additives. But by the hook bait being hardened, but as you said, the other way is meshing, isn't it?
You can either mesh, or some people use that shrink
wrap,
which to me is like eating a toffee with a wrapper still on it. I don't get it.
We'd do it, wouldn't we? We'd still do it. But no, it does seem very, very strange to wrap a bait with a big lump of plastic kind of thing, and then you really are just creating a lure and
I must tell this story. One of the funniest things at the Quay once, one of the bailiffs walked into a swim, and it was when people were using mosquito netting to mesh their baits to stop the poisson chat. And he walked into the swim, and there was a guy sat there, and on his bucket lid, he must have had 150 meshed boilies. And he went, well, you're getting a bit ambitious with all those meshed baits. He said, what do you mean? He said, well, how many carp do you think you're going to catch? He said, I'm meshing them all and throwing them out. And he literally thought that he had to mesh all his baits, even his freebies. And he'd been sat there. And it is a task in itself just doing a few hook baits. And he'd literally done like a kilo of bait. things.
Wrapped up in, oh dear me. Yeah, you do see some interesting sights out there. Interesting. But again, this is the trouble, and this is what we're trying to do at Pallatrax, is trying to get back to grassroots, really explain. To some, we are appearing controversial, but we're not doing it for that. I mean, it's like, what I was saying, I mentioned earlier. I mean, you don't fish on this gear, and I don't fish on this gear because it's anything about me, is it? We fish on this gear because, well, you were with me in America when we found Gamma, weren't we?
Well, it's you. If you're keen, right, and I consider myself, fishing for me is not a hobby. It's not something I do occasionally. This is my crack cocaine. I'm addicted to it. I want to talk about it.
The thing is, with crack cocaine, you tend to be thin.
Yeah, but it's a passion and an obsession, right, and an addiction. So I always want to use the best of everything. And I mean, I spend a ridiculous amount of my money, far too much, on various items of fishing, tackle and bait and just all sorts of things. But I want the best hooks. I want the best line. I want the best bait. I want the best rods and reels. But all these things come at a price. So you have to say to yourself, what can I actually afford? So if you haven't got a huge amount of disposable income, the most important thing to spend your money on is bait. Because bait is what catches the fish. Now, there are plenty of hooks out there, and if you can use whatever you like, but I use the grips because I haven't found a better hook. Prior to that, I was using your original hook.
Same design, same Wingate design, wasn't it?
Right. So, but I want a strong, sharp hook, and the grips ticks all the boxes. So even if I fell out with Simon over something pathetic, I can't imagine.
I'll keep trying.
Right, I would still buy the grips. I wouldn't stop using them because I don't like Simon anymore, or he doesn't like me. And it's the same with Gamma. Regardless of people going, oh, Gamma's no good, blah, blah, blah. It is the best line I have ever used. As Simon said, when we were in America, we spoke to the manufacturers. We've done all the tests. We've done it for ourselves because I never take someone's word for something. If they say to me, oh, this is really good, and I go, is it? That's my first question. Ask a question, is it? So you then have to use it yourself to prove to yourself.
Assume nothing, question everything.
That it's good. And yes, so good line, good hooks. Now, the rod is a tool to get your bait where you want it, the same with a reel. Now, I choose to spend a lot of money on rods and reels because I like nice things. I like shiny things. Right? So it's a tool. But you can't, I see people obsessing too much about what's on the bank and not enough about what's in the water.
And there's nothing wrong with having nice kit, especially if you could afford it. But don't think by buying, I don't know, a Formula One car, you're suddenly going to win Grand Prix. Buying expensive tackle does not mean you're going to catch more fish at all. Fact.
It doesn't turn you into a good angler.
No,
like
that
as I
comes
said about
with
golf clubs, it doesn't.
Really top anglers are like really good golf players. They're few and far between. They have a natural ability. They just have it. Then you've got some really good anglers. Huh?
It's called it.
It. What's it?
Well, that's
it. It. Thank you. That's a film by Stephen King.
Yeah,
It's a clown. You're just walking into a trap here about clowns, aren't you?
Lionel Messi's got it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. There's people who are right at the top of their game, and they have a natural ability as well as growing that ability. And there's loads of anglers out there who are very good anglers, but it isn't down to them having expensive bivvy or expensive rods or pod or anything like that. It's a natural ability to hone a skill, and the way to catch more fish is definitely to start off it's not the bottom by any stretch of imagination, because there's no rank structure in fishing. It's all about pleasure, enjoying, having fun, meeting new people, etc. But it's obviously nice to catch fish. But you need to catch lots of fish to progress. And lots of different species, because we're up the Y next week, aren't we, filming? Yeah. And we're looking forward to that.
But I used to say to my two boys when I was teaching them to fish, I used to say to them, it's about understanding your quarry.
Well,
You know,
you
if
know,
you're fishing for perch, it's not the same as fishing for carp.
No.
So if you want to catch any sort of fish, try and watch as much. I mean, the internet's a fantastic thing. It's full of information. Some of it's crap, but some of it's good. And you can now watch carp feeding, right, and watch what they're doing. And I always say to people, forget the talk about tackle and rigs and bait. Just watch the carp. I mean, it's mostly carp, isn't it, when you watch this underwater footage?
Well,
I
there
know
is some
they're
good stuff. I
doing
mean,
some-
you know, it always amazes me when you see like how a perch will engulf it actually huge suck. Yeah, you know the way things and you look at the rud. It's got an upturned mouth because it's a surface feeder. There's all these different things. It's a bit. One of the characteristics I've come across in all the years I've been fishing is there's almost fish have got a label because they've got fins and scales kind of thing. And that's like to say everything on land that's got feet should be treated the same. Well, it isn't. Different species have different wants, different needs, all those kind of things.
different diet.
Anton's bought a Hoover. Well done, Anton. Glad to see you here. We're missing you then.
He's bought a Hoover.
Yeah, we've got been out. We've got a new house. Paul is saying YouTube has some good bits on fishing. It has, but just be careful. You know, I'm in the trade, and I don't apologise for it. But of course, I want to design good product. I always will put performance over profit, and then I want to explain to you and everybody else why it's a good idea to buy it. And that's for two reasons. One, you know, I'm very passionate about, you know, developing things that actually work. But obviously I want to continue the business moving forward. So I want to sell stuff. But I'm quite comfortable that I can go to bed every night knowing that I'm selling products that I genuinely fish on. I've developed for my own way of fishing. You can stand next to me. You've worked in the factory with me. We're doing stuff this week together, aren't we? Tim's got a kind of pedigree of pop-ups. We're looking at some new pop-ups. We're mucking around with different things. But yeah,
They'll
just
be
careful.
special.
They'll be really special. Horrible ummers.
Horrible
But yeah, just be very careful. And that's not me being cynical. People will try and sell you stuff that you won't necessarily want. They might give you a story or a narrative that mean you believe you're going to catch more fish. There's a lot of other things going on. Carl and Alex, yeah, they're on YouTube. Your hooks are at a good price. I think they're a really good price. They're really expensive to make. There's a third manufacturing process in making grips, so it's they're not cheap. Some fishing on Lee, yeah, I'm with you there. Some fishing on YouTube is shambles, to be honest. Yeah, some of the stuff I've seen is just wrong. To be fair, it's you know this is the problem, isn't it? We talk about social media all the time. It gives everybody a voice. So you know you can be the worst person in the world.
My biggest criticism of social media is, I would say, 60 to 70% who are making films on social media, they're making films because they're more interested in the filming than the actual fishing. So when you actually look at, they're making really good films about fishing, but their ability as a fisherman is terrible. So I sit and I think, right, I was recently looking at some gilthead fishing, because me and my son are going to the coast and we want to catch a gilthead bream. And so I've put into YouTube gilthead bream, and 70% of it was nonsense. It was terrible tackle, terrible. And there was some good stuff, and it's being able to
weed it out,
out the stuff that actually
just needs to be
sense.
like I say. Go back to that same thing. Now, the tagline of mine is "Shoot nothing, question everything." If you're being told a narrative, just do a bit of research. Where are we here? Lee Kelly, oi oi, Dad.
Oi oi.
Scousers in the house.
I bet you still can't cast.
Tutti Frutti, rocks in the bag, awful bait. Now I look back. Dad, I miss you. Hang on a second. Where was that one? There was somebody there put a cool thing about fishing on the rub tips. This is good. Adam Kirk saying, Pom, my point above, would you fish or would anybody fish literally under the tips, and why or why not? If you think about like my tench fishing, for example, we're at Pallatrax, we're in 9-foot margins. So we're sitting back. We've got our rod tips right back, so they're not out over the water, and you're literally fishing just over the lip. If the fish are there and it's good, you know, and why not? You know, if you look at The match angler especially, we can learn a lot how they fish literally on a whip within 5 foot of where they're sitting, and they've got the fish going. I know it's slightly different circumstances, but it's about if the fish are there. The trouble is nowadays, I see it here, people turn up, first thing they do, they get the mallet out and they're whacking, and I've done the swims here so you can push, your spikes in and things like that, but whacking bloody, bank sticks and things like that. And if in fish farming, the skeleton or the skull of the fish is called their ear. And that's because they sense so much that we would hear, but they feel through vibration. So if you're going to make a load of noise and be stamping around and people coming into your swim, you standing up, sitting down, yada yada, fishing under the rod tips, you're wasting your time. But if you've got a stealthy approach, everything's quiet, and those fish are under your rod tips, there can't be a better way of catching because there's so little line between you and that fish. But it's a stealth approach. You cannot make noise. They will feel those footsteps and they will be gone. So certainly if they're there and you kind of hold that kind of dialogue in your head that you've got to be quiet. You can't have people suddenly popping in. You can't have phones going off and all like that, which is what fishing always used to be about, wasn't it? There's much more stealth in it is now.
It's changed a lot. But I see people, and I talk to people about going stalking, and most people can't sit still for more than 5 minutes. They go and sit down quietly, and they'll sit on a bucket or whatever. But then if I'm watching them from the other side of the lake, within 10 minutes they're up and having a look over the edge, and you might just as well not be doing it, because at the end of the day, now if you want to fish the margins and can walk down the bank, quietly drop your rig in the edge and then walk back so that you're away from it, then that's fine. But I like fishing under my rod tips because every angler, carp angler, let's talk about carp fishing, every carp angler in the world winds in, pulls his boilie off and throws it in the edge. So the fish are constantly finding baits right in front of your swim. The guy that was sitting there before you did the same. And the chances are that if he had any bait left over, threw it in the edge. So the fish are used to finding food. And I recently had a guy and his daughter fishing at Lequy, and he picked a swim, and I said, right, do not ignore right under your rod tips there. I said, because you've got a great margin to your left, and people from the other bank are catching them on that margin. I said, those fish patrol along that edge. When they get to your swim, they don't swim out and round, they swim past you. I said, but if you're moving around and doing things, they won't stop. They'll just swim past because they know you're there. But if you're quiet, set your bivvy well back, you'll catch them there because they're swimming past.
And if they're there, they're there. And obviously...
And he did really well. Him and his daughter did really well catching fish literally a rod length.
I used to catch all out the margins because they were deep margins. More vodka. Now it's water. I had a rum earlier. Lico, don't throw them, and you taught me well. Yeah. If anybody throws in, Lee will be down there with snorkel and mask. This is quite an interesting one because I'm actually with you here, Stephen, on pop-ups. And so if I read it out and then I'll throw it over to Tim again, and then because Tim's a bit of a guru on pop-ups. I do not really understand pop-ups. We pride ourselves on using the best ingredients in our baits. We lay a bed of these high quality baits in our swim and then put our natural lure on our hook and cast it in the area of covering the quality bait. Yet we want them to take the lure. There's no question that it works, but to me it shouldn't. I don't understand. Good question. I like that.
Right. Now, there is so much footage of carp ignoring or sucking in and blowing pop-ups out. It happens all the time. Occasionally, the hook gets a hold and one makes a mistake. I have caught hundreds and hundreds of carp on pop-ups. But me, or Frank Warwick and I, should I say, started playing around with pop-ups that weren't just a lure, they were food. And it took us a lot of playing around because most commercial made pop-ups you buy are made from a thing called silicone bubbles, They used to be glass, they're now plastic, but they're tiny, minuscule. You can't. It looks like flour, but they're actually air bubbles. But
somebody makes them. Very small person.
I know.
Sits there one by one.
But they have no protein.
And the
They're
days
not-
off, he covers his baits with mesh.
But they're not food, right? So a pop-up, mostly, if you taste a pop-up that you buy in the shop, a big percentage of them look good, smell good, taste of nothing. And that's because there is nothing to taste in them.
Yeah.
Right, just neat flavour. If you taste any neat flavour, it tastes vile. Add some sweetener or some sugar, and they taste a lot better. So me and Frank Warwick played around with adding food content, and we had to play around with finding something that gave the pop-up a food signal. And my view, now Frank used to play around with pH values and things. I didn't go down that route. I wanted to turn my pop-ups into technically sweets, that when you put one in your mouth, you actually wanted to eat it because it smelt nice, tasted nice. Used to use a lot of sweeteners, right? But again, having to balance things, putting things like citric acid in baits to make them taste nicer, because citric acid makes fruit flavours taste nicer.
Personally, with me, and I don't, the guy that really taught me to kind of start really getting into carp fishing and talking pop-ups, Baldy Dave, and we were literally matching the hatch with our pop-ups. So he would spend the time the night before using the same paste that we were using on our bottom bait around a cork ball, and I don't think that's beatable. And if you want to be fishing right at the top of your game, that's what we should all be doing. That's the truth, but it's the buggery factor. That's what it comes down to. You've got to tie them on. Sometimes they don't take to the cork ball. You've got to chip the cork ball off, or you can use cork dust, which I don't like using because it's then not the same. So if you want to really match the hatch and replicate, but also on other things, we know that lures work. And you could technically say that your hook bait or your hair bait is a lure anyway, because they can't physically eat it. It's impossible.
But there is the difference between, as you say, match the hatch, cork ball, or the high vis bait.
It's like the lure.
Yeah.
When you're trout fishing or spinning and things like that, you're pulling, you're getting a reaction, and there's definitely attractions and flavours that will pull a fish. Because I've mentioned before, fish have got a thing called an olfactory system. It's how they taste on water, like we smell on air, and so they will home in on attractors. But like Tim's always said, if they taste it, and you can have carp who've got chemoreceptors on their cheeks, so they can taste. It's like having your tongue on the outside, so they can actually taste things. If it's not food, they might or may or may not put it. But it's a long conversation we can have, but I want to carry on because we're cracking on with time here. But Lee Kelly, this is when me and Tim will have handbags at 10 paces. Long hair or short hair from the Scouse?
Well, you know me. I like long hair, and the reason for that is I think that the hair, if it's short, the boilie and the hook sometimes interact badly together, right? And sometimes I think the boilie, if it's not matched to the right hook size, can mask the hook, and it's too easy for the fish to blow out. When you separate them, they act almost as individuals. But so the original hair rig that Kevin Maddox and Lenny Middleton came out with was 3 to 4 inches long. It looks ridiculous. It doesn't look like
where I am with it, and like I say, we both catch plenty of fish, so in all honesty, it's a difficult one to answer. Where I am with it, with all the areas of fishing I've done, from match fishing, fly fishing, lure fishing, it goes on and on. My boat fishing, sea fishing, things like that. The bait and the hook is one. Hence, I fish a short hair. And like I said, it's horses for courses, I suppose. If you're happy, if you're catching lots of fish, and we both tend to catch fish, so it's always a difficult one. And what might work on one moment from the angle of the fish feeding or whatever happens on that circumstances might change to the other. So it's always going to be a very difficult one.
Yeah, and you do have to adapt, because certainly we notice at the Quay at different times of the year the fish feed differently. So start getting funny occurrences, and sometimes by making the hair shorter or longer, or using multiple baits, or using smaller baits, and
Which is what you do in all other areas of fishing, but in carp fishing. I know the conversation always seems to get overtaken by carp, but you know what I've always said: if you go to a high end match lake, if you get everybody to bring in their rigs on the day, you will see that, and their baiting strategy and things like that. They're there and thereabouts. The people that are right at the top of the game are fastidious with their presentation and how they're making bait and things like that.
I had a conversation.
I haven't finished. It's so rude. I do apologise. It's senile. I'll make him some Horlicks in a minute and put him back out to. But now I've lost the train of thought. You see?
Well,
no. Basically, I have lost my train of thought.
You were talking about match anglers and
matches. So yes, there you go. So what I'm saying is, if you bring in from a carp fishery, so if we went to the Queen now and got everybody to bring in their terminal tackle, it'd all be different. So by having inconsistency, you will only ever get inconsistent results. I've known people, you know as well, damn well, and we kind of like, it's always agitated us, hasn't it? Where people, we're trying to help people, and they go, and you're catching fish, and they're going, nah, carry on, and you're doing the way I'm doing it, and you're going, but you're not catching anything, and we're catching lots. And they go, yeah, but I've caught like this before. And that, in match fishing, if somebody saw somebody else catching more fish, they would want to be replicating. It's not copying, it's replicating. It's part of watercraft. And so if Tim was sitting next to me catching more on a long hair, I'd be on a long hair straight away. He wouldn't go on a short hair, mind.
No. But, right.
Oh my Lord, there's loads of
very good match angler once said to me, if you're not getting any bites, use a smaller hook and finer line. If you're missing bites, put a bigger hook on. Now, that shows the level of tweaking that they're doing. Right? Carp anglers too often are so going down a blind alley and saying, well, this has worked in the past. And the trouble is, and we're going to bring another subject in it, bite indication. If your bobbin doesn't move, you don't know if you've been done. And if you've been done, you should be thinking about changing something. And Pom knows, I mean, and we've talked about it in the past, the doe bobbin, right? If you know, if you're getting bite indications and you're not hooking fish, then you have to ask yourself the question, do I need to make a change? And normally you do. And it could be something simple like a bigger hook, a smaller hook, a bigger bait, a smaller bait, a longer hook. I mean, all these things. But you need to think, I need to change something, instead of carrying on doing something that's not working. And people do that far too much.
You can talk, well, we both talk from our own fisheries experience, but I know Bob, especially Bob who runs the Quay, Tim's son, he gets so frustrated when he tries, you know, his job there is to actually help people to catch more fish. That's his job. You know, catch more fish, they have a great experience, they'll come back, they'll talk about it, they'll share the news, you know, that's how it works. He gets so frustrated when people come up and they're preconditioned what they're going to do. They haven't, you know, they've never seen the water before, never fished it before, but this is how I carp fish. And you don't do that. You have to have flexibility in angling on the day. You know, if a fly fisher or a match angler fished the same way every time, they wouldn't be at the top of their game. You need flexibility. And asking people on the ground, especially like Lee, Bob and all the kind of bailiffs out there, they're desperate to help. So do always ask these people. But also, you know, that's not to say you should only listen to them, but at least have it in the back of your head that there's another way to fish. Because if not, you just will get on a train and go down the same track time and time again. Every now and again you'll catch a few, but you want to be going out. You know, I never go out with an expectation to blank, and that's not an arrogance. I fish for myself. I'm more than happy to share, but I'm very comfortable with how I fish, and invariably I don't blank because I'm putting so much emphasis on bait quality, like Tim says. You know, that's his main thing. You know, presentation, but I will always have flexibility, and you should always have flexibility.
You just said something there about...
Sorry, Darren Palmer. Hi from France. Hope you're having a good trip. Just because I missed loads of things, I can't. I think you're all getting used to it. Matt Wise, I only asked when I watched and mid-30 spit up a rig and hook bait on a size 4, just want short hair on a 24mm bottom bait. So you asked another question there, Matt. I'm useless with people know this. I'm not too sure what you're saying there, Matt. But like again, what I would say, Matt, is what would work on one take won't work on the other. Different angles of fish, different the different speeds they're sucking it in. All these things come into 2 comments up. Hang on a second, mate. Let me try and find it. Peter, really hope the brother-in-law does well at Pallatrax. Yes, Simon, we're looking for it. Shame you couldn't make it. I'm looking forward to some kind. Oh, here it is. Big baits and separation of hair on hook recommendation. Yeah, well, like I say, Matt, we were just covering that earlier. Whereas I fish,
bait too close to the hook.
Bait spot on to the hook. This is a bit of an overkill. Oh, hang on a sec. I'll press the button there. He goes, where's that? So for me, this is a cat rig setup, but that's the kind of that's 2 22mm baits on there. Yeah, me and Tech, you're right. So that's the kind of length I'm fishing. Whereas Tim would probably be that would be at the end of there, so to speak. So we do fish it, but like I say, it's that setup, though that's on the cat steam link and things like that. This is exactly the same as I fish on carp or barbel. I'm fishing, and I certainly with barbel, I'm a massive, and chub, I'm a massive believer that the hook should be as close as possible. But each their own, Tim, innit?
Well, all right, going back to chub fishing, I know carp, but chub fishing, I was surprised that everyone, when I started doing a lot of chub fishing on the Riveroos for big chub, how everyone said you've got to have the bait tight to the hook. And me being a contrary git at some occasion, I sometimes think, no, I'm going to try doing things differently. Now, chub are the past masters. They're the only fish I've ever witnessed pick a bait up in their lips.
Innit?
Carp don't do that. Carp suck baits in, right? But chub pick baits up, swim off, but they still have to suck it in at some point. But they are past masters for lipping baits.
And when they know it's wrong, they drop it, don't they?
They drop it. Or you strike what looks like a really good bite and you just pulling the bait straight out of their lips. But I found a way around that was to use small, really hard baits, like tiger nuts for chub. It was unheard of. But they don't seem to like picking them up so much because they're small and hard, and B, they want to crush them, so they chuck them to the back of their throat.
What has come out of this conversation this evening, I think, again, is there is a myriad of different, or a plethora, I like that word, a plethora of different things on the go here all the time. And Matt's just come back about the hair length. I had it shorter. Don't get me wrong, I don't have it tight. Like when I'm fly fishing for carp with a cork ball, that is one and the same. Okay, but I always have that flexibility for that bait or my squab, because I tend to fish, cut down squabs, to give rotation, but still making sure that at all time the hook is clear of the bait, because you're creating a different dynamic. You're now asking the fish to actually hook itself and things like that. But another time, Matt, you could have been fishing it, and every fish would have been nailed on a short hair, and you'd be going, oh, well, why is that? And that's fishing. That is fishing. You'll never. So I'm just going to go, because we've really, as we always talked on, the live feed winner
is me.
It's not. This won't come out, or come back to front. James, you have won. James, you're still there. Mr. Stinson, you have won tonight's live feed raffle prize, which is the grips bundle and booster bundle. So congratulations. If you can please PM me, Simon Pomeroy, via my personal messenger with your address details, James, I will get those off to you. Congratulations. So, there you go, James. Yay! Happy days. So just PM me, James, I'll get that sorted for you. So what would you like to finish off with? You're going to go back out. Tim's on a bit of a miss. Well, he's a bit of a kind of a gypsy this week. He's down here. He's doing a bit of fishing. We're working on pop-ups, aren't we? Then we're going to go up to the Y to do this film with Carpology. Going to hopefully go bass fishing. Weather's looking good. I've just got to try and find some time, because it's this morning. Choir practice was out of the window.
Yeah, I miss going to church this morning.
Yeah, I was making bait 8 o'clock this morning, mate. You were just sitting in the sun.
Yeah,
The sun,
it's been
the
good.
colour of your face.
Because
strawberry.
I've escaped from my house, which is full of screaming children at the moment.
Well, you have them.
Reasons.
It's your
No,
fault.
well, they're not.
Yeah, but it's it's the next generation. So if you hadn't had that generation,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have had the next generation giving you all this grief.
I had to get away from it.
So yeah, so we're lumber with him. I thought he's coming down for a day, so he's done. Yeah, he's down here. So yeah, we'll probably pop in another time on the team page. Don't forget, if you aren't Team Pallatrax members, do please join. It's a free initiative, and there's lots of friendly faces now. 2,700 of us now.
Bloody hell.
The ranks are growing, so we'll let you away with that one. But look, thanks ever so much. Thanks for Tim for sitting in here. I dragged him away from float fishing. He was just about to start float fishing. And I shall go and sit up the bank now and watch the master at work. So thanks for your time. Thanks for all the questions. Sorry if I missed them. I'm a bit useless, as you know, on the tech. Next week, my live feed will be back at 7 o'clock, probably with Tim on the team page. So, yeah, thanks for everything. Thanks for your support, and interesting times coming ahead, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're going to catch on the wire, aren't we? We're doing this for so many years. I'm reintroducing, next week you'll see the reintroduction of the Meat Beast, which is going to go on a milk protein based mix, and we'll be taking it up to the Y, and we're doing a filming. Well, Curly from Carpology is coming down. We'll be doing a barbel film on
I want to catch a barb on a float.
yeah, I've only done it once. So they do come on the float.
Yeah.
But yes, we should be going up there, so we'll be popping in throughout the week to say hello, and yeah, thanks ever so much for all the support. And if you've got any questions for me and Tim, always feel to reach out to me via PM. So I'm out of here. Take care, folks, and we'll speak to you all soon. All the best. Cheers. Good night.
Good luck. Cheers.